Hello. Today I'm going to talk to you about our assignment for the interaction of color. And I also wanted to reiterate a couple of things. You're probably going to hear me say the same thing fairly often in the course. And I think maybe the most important thing that I want you to remember is that color and our experience of it is subjective. And by that I mean that it's different. Every person, every lighting, every representation might give a different experience or feeling of color, if that makes sense. And one of the big things that makes color so subjective is the fact that if you put one color next to another color, it changes the way we perceive that first color. So color A looks like whatever it looks like, you stick color B next to it, and then things start to change. So this is something that artists notice, whether or not they title it or name it something, they see it. You put your color A down, you put your color B to it, and you think, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. Or maybe you think, yeah, I want it to be like that. So we're going to do these exercises, these Joseph Albers exercises about the interaction of color. It's a kind of a classic color theory exercise. And even though it's been done by a million people, a million times, it's still worth it to do it yourself because you will learn kind of firsthand, I guess, what the colors that you've made are doing, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm going to show you more or less what I'm looking for. We're going to go for we're going to try to make 8 finished ones. And they won't need to be photographed all separately. You could put 8 of them together and submit that, or 4 of them together might be nicer. So you'd have two photographs, or you could photograph each one separately. However you want to do that, and I'll have more instructions about that later. But for now, let's change over to the color mixing camera, and I will I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. So, what have I got? I have got a blank piece of paper, and I've got some re-wetted, that is to say, I added water to my wash, and it's kind of soupy, but I'm going to use some of it all soupy anyway. One thing I wanted to talk to you about here in making this is that I want this color that I've made, this sort of lilac color. Now, you'll notice here that this is a color exercise where you're making the colors you want. You're not trying to match something else. You're not going for anything in particular. I would say that it is most useful, this assignment, if you make colors that both appeal to you and are not just, well, I don't want them just out of a tube. Make sure that you mix some colors, right? But also they should be colors that maybe don't have well-defined names. They should be, you know, a purple-ish color or maybe a yellowish color, right? They don't need to be sort of red-violet. They don't need to be yellow-orange. They don't need to be anything from the color wheel. Okay, so I'm going to put this color on here, and it's a little streakier than I'd like it. That's okay for now. Putting this sort of weird pale Easter eggy color down. I actually would like to get it a little less streaky, so I'm going to try to employ my fan brush. You remember me talking about the fan brush? Because if you work the color enough back and forth, you can get a kind of an even grid. If not no brush strokes, such a fine crisscrossing that you don't notice it's brush strokes. I didn't work it quickly enough. It's getting a little dry there. I don't know if you can see that. And this is the kind of thing that I want you to try to get it flat, but I also don't want you to go crazy, right? That's pretty good. I'll leave that one that way. Let's put some on this side. I want to make kind of a lot of color here, a lot of different colors. One color I'm not super happy with this is it's pretty, like I said, pretty Easter eggy. I would like it to be a little muddier. I don't mean you should want your colors to be muddier. I mean, I want my color to be muddier. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to think about the color wheel just for a minute. And I'm going to take something, my color is kind of in this range, and take something from over here and mix one of these colors, one of the complements, in with it to get the color to be a little less, what's the word, saturated, right? I'm looking for something a little more natural looking, right? So I'm going to want to use a little bit of yellow, and I think I'm actually just going to yellow or even red orange would do. But I'm going to put a little yellow out there. I just got paint all over my hand. Now I can transfer that onto the good stuff and have a mess. Anyway, I want just a little bit of that. My palette knife is really dirty though, so I'm not going to use that. I'm going to stick that in there and see what we get. This should make my color much, I don't know, much earthier and more, it should look more rich in a way, right? Because it's getting to be a kind of a complicated color. It's going from being red, blue, and white to red, blue, and white plus yellow. So anytime you add another color, one thing that happens is every time you add another color to colors, you lose brightness and intensity, right? Luminosity, you can lose some of that, but you gain a kind of a richness, right? Because you've got kind of more going on, right? It's more complex, more interesting. Although there's a limit to that, right? If I were to keep on adding color, eventually I would have something sort of so dark and murky that you probably wouldn't be able to tell what colors were in it. It would just sort of look brownish, right? But see how this one, I'm going to sort of butt it right up against there so you can see that. See how this one is sort of more, I don't know, just more yellow. It looks more yellow, doesn't it? It should look more yellow. Let's say that. Okay, let's get this one sort of cleared out like that. Okay. Now, that's pretty good. I'm going to put one more down in here. I'm going to make this sort of a dark blue one, right? A dark blue one. And I want the blue that is the not green blue, which is, I think, this one, the cobalt. Let's find out. I might have this wrong. Well, it's hard to tell, isn't it? I think I'm going to put them both out and double check. No, I think that's the one I want. Anyway, bear with me. I'm sorry this is taking so long. But now there's that one is definitely a little bit greener. These two blues are really similar. Ordinarily, you would be able to tell the difference more easily than this. I'm sorry that these are a little hard to tell the difference on. And this is one of those times when the purity of the colors to me is not important at all. That's why everything's all kind of gunked up and gray here, right? It looks kind of green, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. And it's not very dark. So how can I get that color to be darker? What can I do? Let's check that color wheel again, shall we? Looks like I ought to put a little orange in it. Let's try that. Of course, there isn't any orange mixed up here, but I do have yellow handy, and I also have red. Make kind of a dirty orange to put into it right away. One thing about the palette knife is when you have hardened, dried gouache, it doesn't work that well, right? Because you can't scrape it over and move it over. So you might have to use the brush more in that case. Yeah, that's getting nice. And isn't that lovely? That way that like the cool and the warm color come together there. It's just really nice. So that's a thing. We should talk about that for a minute. That's one of the things, I guess not all artists are sort of color forward, but some of them are into the form, right? But painters, ooh, that is so orange. Painters tend to want to paint because they really love colors. Even painters that if you saw their painting and you thought, it's not very bright, not very, zippy, they still probably love their color. A lot of my paintings are very high key and very subtle, like they're mostly white, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of shades of white, but I paint because I just love to have, I love playing with color. I love looking at it. I love observing its differences. So this is pretty dark gray. It turned into pretty much gray entirely, and I can hardly see that there's any blue in there, but I'm not going to let that worry me. There's going to be no, our last paint mixing project, well, the one where we made the color wheel, there were going to be colors that weren't working right? This one doesn't, there's no such thing as a color that isn't right for this. All the colors that you mix will be just right for this assignment. So really kind of feel free about, experimenting with that. You don't have to make it, you don't have to make them to any particular recipe. They can be however you want them. Because I really believe that you learn the most about color mixing by what? Anybody want to say? Yeah, by mixing color, exactly. So the more you mix, even if they're bad ones or ugly ones or ones you don't end up using, the more you're going to know. And that goes even for people who've been painting for a long time. I'm always surprised. I thought that would be more blue than it is. It mostly looks like another shade of this, but with a lot darker, right? Okay, so next I'm going to move these things out of the way. I'm going to turn off the camera and end this video, and then come back and start another one about what I expect you to do with all this stuff now that you've made some of these pieces of color. You should also have some kind of maybe some smaller ones. You know, the shape and size of them isn't going to matter too much, but once I show you what I want you to do with them, then you can make a good decision about how to paint them. Okay, that's all.